Hello, and welcome to a very special, very shocking edition of our 90-Day Fiancé Deep Dive. I'm your host, and tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most heartbreaking, and some would say, infuriating, stories to ever come out of this franchise. A story that began with what seemed like a genuine, if slightly awkward, international romance, and has now spiraled into a saga of betrayal, exposed secrets, and a young woman's world shattered into a million pieces. We're talking, of course, about Gino, Jasmine, and the bombshell that no one, especially not Jasmine, saw coming. You remember them, don't you? The couple from Michigan and Panama. He was the shy, often bewildered-looking hat enthusiast. She was the fiery, passionate, and incredibly vocal woman who wore her heart on her sleeve. Their relationship was never what you'd call smooth sailing. There were the explosive arguments, the tears, the trust issues. Oh, the trust issues were a constant, humming background noise to their entire journey. But through it all, many of us believed in their core connection. We saw Jasmine's raw, unfiltered love for Gino. We saw her dreams of a family, of a stable life, of being cherished. And we saw Gino, in his own quiet, sometimes clumsy way, trying to make it work. He endured the scrutiny, the criticism, and Jasmine's fiery temper. He proposed. They navigated the K-1 visa process. It seemed, against all odds, that they were on the path to a real, albeit dramatic, marriage. But then, the ground gave way. A secret, so profound and so devastating, was exposed, revealing that the entire foundation of their relationship was built on a lie. This isn't just about a simple rumor or a misunderstanding. This is about a hidden life, a second woman, and a level of deception that has left Jasmine, and the entire 90-Day Fiancé community, reeling. So, grab your tissues, and maybe something stronger, because we are about to go on a journey. We're going to re-examine their story from the beginning, but this time, with the chilling knowledge of what was happening behind the scenes. We're going to connect the dots that we missed, analyze the red flags that were waving frantically in our faces, and finally, we're going to expose the truth about Gino's other life. This is the full story. Let's rewind. Let's go back to the very beginning, when Gino and Jasmine first appeared on our screens. The premise was simple, at least on the surface. An American man from Michigan had met a beautiful woman from Panama online. They'd been talking for a considerable time, and now, he was ready to take the next step and meet her in person, with the intention of pursuing the K-1 fiancé visa. Our first impression of Gino? Well, he was unique. He was quiet, reserved, almost painfully shy. He had this peculiar habit of never being seen without one of his many, many hats. He worked in an engineering field, a stable job, but he didn't exude confidence or charisma. He was, for lack of a better word, awkward. And then there was Jasmine. Vibrant, loud, emotionally expressive, and stunningly beautiful. On paper, it was a classic case of opposites attract. But was it attraction, or was it something more complex? From their very first meeting in Panama, the dynamics were clear. Jasmine was all in. She was passionate, she was demanding of his attention and affection, and she had a clear vision for their future. She spoke openly about wanting a baby, about building a life together, about leaving her past struggles behind. Gino, on the other hand, seemed perpetually shell-shocked. He was cautious with his words, hesitant with his spending, and often seemed overwhelmed by the force of nature that was Jasmine. And then came the first major crack, the issue of trust. Jasmine discovered that before his trip, Gino had been sending photos of her to his ex-girlfriend. This wasn't just any ex, this was a woman he had a long, complicated history with. Jasmine, rightly so, was furious. It was a massive breach of trust. The arguments were epic. We saw her throw his hat in a pool, scream, cry, and question everything. This was our first big red flag. A man who is truly committed to his new partner doesn't seek validation or engage in secret communications with an ex. But Gino played it off as a mistake, a moment of poor judgment. He apologized, they reconciled, and the journey continued. But the seed of doubt was planted, not just in Jasmine's mind, but in ours as well. Why would he do that? Was it simply cluelessness, as he claimed? Or was it a pattern of behavior, a sign of a man who was not fully detached from his past, or perhaps, not fully invested in his future? As their story progressed, we saw more of these moments. Gino's frugality, which often came across as stinginess, was a constant source of tension. Jasmine wanted romance, grand gestures, reassurance that he could provide the life she dreamed of. Gino seemed to count every penny, from the cost of a dinner to the price of a hotel room. Again, on the surface, you could argue he was just being a careful, Midwestern man. But looking back, through the lens of what we now know, could this frugality have been about more than just saving money? Could it have been about financing a separate, hidden life? Then there were the intimacy issues. Jasmine is a physically affectionate person. She craved touch, kisses, public displays of affection. Gino often shied away from it. He seemed uncomfortable, stiff, almost as if he was playing a role that didn't come naturally to him. We attributed it to his personality, his shyness. But what if it was something else? What if the emotional energy required to maintain a facade in one relationship leaves little left for another? The visa process was stressful, as it always is. There were questions about Gino's financial ability to support Jasmine, there were more arguments, there was the dramatic reveal of Jasmine's past cosmetic surgeries, which Gino handled with surprising calmness, actually. It was one of the few times he seemed genuinely unfazed. They overcame each hurdle, or so we thought. They got the visa approval. Jasmine moved to Michigan. We saw them navigating the cold weather, the cultural shift, the challenges of living together. It was during this domestic phase that a new, more unsettling side of Jasmine emerged for some viewers. Her demands seemed to intensify. Her emotions were even more volatile. She wanted a ring upgrade, a big wedding, a baby immediately. She talked about her biological clock constantly. To many, she seemed high maintenance, even unreasonable. But let's pause and consider her perspective. She had left her entire life, her family, her country, for this man. She had put all her eggs in the Gino basket. Her frantic energy, her demands, they can also be interpreted as the actions of a woman who is desperately trying to secure a future that feels perpetually unstable. She was trying to grasp onto tangible proof of his commitment, a better ring, a wedding, a child, because the intangible proof, his emotional fidelity, felt so elusive. And Gino? He placated her. He promised a new ring. He talked about a wedding. He even, reluctantly, agreed to start trying for a baby. But there was always a hesitation, a delay, an excuse. He was waiting for a bonus, he was worried about the cost, he needed more time. We saw him as passive, henpecked, a man being dragged along by a forceful woman. But what if his passivity was a strategy? What if his hesitation wasn't about money or timing, but about the fact that making these permanent, legal commitments with Jasmine would lock him into a life that he was, simultaneously, betraying in the most profound way imaginable? The cracks were widening, but we were all looking at the wrong ones. We were focused on the loud, dramatic cracks on the surface, Jasmine's outbursts, her tears, her demands. We weren't looking for the silent, seismic fault line running deep beneath the foundation. And then, the leak. The rumor. The whisper that became a roar. It started on social media, in the dark corners of fan forums and gossip sites. A blurry photo. An anonymous message. A claim so outrageous that most people dismissed it as fan fiction. The claim? That Gino was not just a shy engineer from Michigan. The claim was that he was already married. Or, at the very least, had a whole other serious girlfriend back home, concurrent to his entire relationship with Jasmine. At first, it was easy to ignore. This franchise is rife with rumors. But this one had legs. Because it wasn't just one source. Evidence began to trickle out. A social media profile that had been carefully hidden. Photos with another woman, timestamped during the very periods he was filming his love story with Jasmine. Messages. Receipts. The digital breadcrumbs of a double life. The other woman, let's call her Dawn for the purposes of our narrative tonight, began to take shape. She wasn't an ex. She was a current. A woman Gino had been seeing, and by some accounts, was living with or was in a committed, long-term relationship with, while he was flying to Panama, while he was proposing to Jasmine on camera, while he was applying for her visa, while she was moving her entire life to the United States for him. Can you even process the scale of that deception? Let's just sit with that for a moment. Imagine Jasmine, in her apartment in Michigan, believing she is building a life with her fiancé. She's fighting with him about wedding plans, about baby names, about his hats. And all the while, just miles away, perhaps in the same city, there is another woman who believes she is Gino's partner. A woman he was texting, seeing, and potentially supporting, with the same money he was claiming was too tight to buy Jasmine a better ring. The exposure was not a gentle reveal. It was a nuclear bomb. It hit the internet, and it hit Jasmine directly. We may not have seen it all on camera, but the aftermath was palpable. The social media posts from Jasmine shifted from fiery anger to something much, much darker, a deep, profound, soul-crushing sadness. The kind of sadness that doesn't manifest in screams, but in silence. In posts about betrayal, about broken trust, about feeling like a fool. The light in her eyes, that fierce, fiery light, seemed to have been extinguished. This was no longer about a thrown hat or a missed romantic gesture. This was about her entire reality being exposed as a fiction. The man she loved, the future she dreamed of, the sacrifices she made, it was all built on a lie. She wasn't just a fiancé with a difficult partner, she was the other woman in her own relationship. She was the unwitting participant in an affair she didn't know she was having. Now, let's talk about Gino's reaction. When the news broke, he went silent. He deleted social media accounts. He hid. There were no immediate explanations, no attempts to clarify. The silence was deafening, and in its own way, it was a confession. The man who was so awkward on camera, who struggled to form sentences under pressure, was now facing a pressure he could not possibly talk his way out of. So he simply vanished from the public eye. This is where the story twists from a simple tale of betrayal into a complex psychological puzzle. We have to ask ourselves, why? What would possess a man to go on an international television show, to subject himself and two women to this global humiliation, to engage in such an elaborate and high-risk deception? Let's explore the possibilities. The cowardice hypothesis. This theory posits that Gino is a profoundly passive and non-confrontational individual. He was in a relationship with Dawn that he was unhappy in but lacked the courage to end. Along comes Jasmine, offering passion, excitement, and a way out. But instead of ending things with Dawn like an adult, he chose the path of least resistance. He did nothing. He simply added a new relationship on top of the old one, hoping somehow that the problem would resolve itself. The television show, the visa process, these were not part of a master plan, but rather a runaway train that he was too cowardly to jump off. He got in too deep with Jasmine and couldn't find a way to back out without exposing his initial lie. The ego hypothesis. This theory suggests that Gino's quiet, unassuming exterior masked a deep-seated need for validation. Here was a man who, by his own admission, had not had much luck with women. To have not one, but two beautiful women devoted to him, even if one was based on a lie, fed his ego in a powerful way. The secret itself might have been a thrill. Being the center of a dramatic, televised love story while managing a secret life could have made him feel clever, important, and in control, the very opposite of how he appeared on screen. The financial control hypothesis. This is a darker theory. It suggests that the deception was, in part, about money. By keeping two relationships, he could control the narrative with each woman. To Jasmine, he could play the frugal man, limiting his financial exposure. With Dawn, he might have had a different financial arrangement. By never fully committing legally to Jasmine through marriage, he maintained a financial escape hatch. The prenuptial agreement he famously wanted? It takes on a much more sinister tone in this context. Was it not just about protecting his assets from a potential divorce, but about ensuring he could easily exit the relationship when the time came, with his finances intact for his other life? The pathological liar hypothesis. This is the most disturbing possibility. That Gino suffers from a personality disorder or a compulsive need to lie and create complex false realities. In this scenario, he may not have a primary, real relationship. Both women were players in a narrative he was writing. The lies weren't a means to an end, they were the end in themselves. The exposure wasn't just getting caught, it was the inevitable conclusion of a house of cards that was always destined to fall. The truth likely lies in a combination of these factors. A cowardly man with a fragile ego, who found himself in a situation that spiraled far beyond his control, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Now, let's focus on the true victim of this sordid tale, Jasmine. Her pain is the heart of this story. We need to understand the layers of her devastation. First, there is the personal betrayal. The man she loved, the man she defended against critics, the man she was preparing to marry and have a child with, did not exist. The person she thought she knew was a carefully constructed mirage. Every I love you, every promise, every moment of intimacy is now tainted, recontextualized as a performance. This is a psychological injury that cuts to the very core of one's ability to trust, not just others, but one's own judgment. She must be replaying every moment, every hesitation, every red flag, and blaming herself for not seeing it sooner. Second, there is the public humiliation. Her entire relationship played out on a global stage. Her most private moments, her tears, her insecurities, her fights, her dreams, were entertainment for millions. And now, the final, cruel twist is that she was the punchline of a joke she didn't know was being told. She has to face her friends, her family, and millions of strangers, knowing they all know she was duped. The shame and embarrassment must be overwhelming. Third, there is the existential crisis. She left everything for this. She used her K-1 visa. She is in a foreign country, away from her support system. Her immigration status is now tied to a man who has betrayed her in the most fundamental way. Does she stay in the US and try to rebuild her life from the ashes, alone and in a culture that is not her own? Does she go back to Panama, feeling like a failure, having to start all over again? Her entire life plan has been vaporized. The footage we have of her now is heartbreaking. The vibrant, dramatic, life-loving woman is gone, replaced by someone who looks hollowed out. The sadness in her eyes is a quiet, resigned grief. It's the look of someone whose world has ended, not with a bang, but with a devastating, exposed whisper. And what of the other woman, Dawn? While we know less about her, her world has also been turned upside down. She too was lied to. She may have believed she was in a monogamous relationship, only to discover her partner was starring in a reality TV show about marrying another woman. The shock, the betrayal, the humiliation, it's a mirror of Jasmine's pain. Two women, pitted against each other by a man who claimed to care for them both, now united in their shared victimhood. So, where are they now? The aftermath is still unfolding. Jasmine is reportedly trying to pick up the pieces. There are rumors of a potential spin-off where she navigates her new reality. She is leaning on her friends and her social media followers for support. But the road to recovery will be long. Trusting again will feel impossible. The scars from this will last a lifetime. Gino remains in the shadows. His silence continues. He may be hoping the storm will pass, that people will forget. But the digital footprint of his deception is permanent. He will forever be known as the man who lived a double life on national television. The producers of 90 Day Fiancé are, undoubtedly, facing questions. How much did they know? Could they have uncovered this sooner? The show thrives on drama, but this crosses a line from entertainment into real, profound human damage. This exposure will undoubtedly change how they vet their participants in the future. And us, the audience? We are left as witnesses. We watched this relationship like a dramatic novel, and then discovered the author had written a hidden, tragic ending in invisible ink. It's a sobering reminder that what we see on screen is a curated, edited version of reality. The real stories, the real pain, continues long after the cameras stop rolling. The story of Gino and Jasmine is a cautionary tale for the digital age. It's about the fragility of trust and the ease with which a person can construct a false reality. It's about the devastating consequences of cowardice and deceit. But most of all, it's a story about a woman's resilience. Jasmine's heart is broken, her dreams are shattered, but she is still standing. The fire that was momentarily extinguished is slowly being rekindled, not as a flame of anger directed at a man, but as a pilot light of strength for herself. She will recover. She will learn to trust herself again. And one day, she will find a love that is not a lie, but is as real and as powerful as the passion she always knew she deserved. Gino's new wife, or rather, the exposure of his other life, was the twist that ended their story as we knew it. But for Jasmine, it is not the end. It is a brutal, painful, and public end of a chapter. But her story, her real story, is just beginning. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of the most shocking stories in 90-Day Fiancé history. The drama, the tears, the twists, it's all a reminder that truth is often stranger, and more heartbreaking, than fiction. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.